Okay, then you start reading, Yasmin.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Similarly, the reasoning which cancels the dynamics of the absolute, the imposition of the stigma of unreal reality on the pragmatic truth of things because it is pragmatic, is difficult to accept. For the pragmatic truth is, after all, not something quite other, quite separate and unconnected with the spiritual truth. It is a result of the energy or a motion of the dynamic activity of the spirit. A distinction must, no doubt, be made between the two, but the idea of an entire opposition can rest only on the postulate that the silent and quiescent status is the eternal truth and whole being. But in that case, we must conclude that there is nothing dynamic in the absolute, and all dynamism is a contradiction of the supreme nature of the divine and eternal. But if a temporal or cosmic reality of any kind exists, there must be a power, an inherent dynamic force of the absolute, which brought it into being, and there is no reason to suppose that the power of the absolute can do nothing but create illusions. On the contrary, the power that creates must be the force of an omnipotent, omniscient consciousness. The creations of the absolute real should be real and not illusions. And since it is the one existence, they must be self creations, forms of a manifestation of the eternal, not forms of nothing erected out of the original void, whether a void being or a void consciousness by Maya.
Yeah. Okay. So, chapter is the reality. Just 1 second. Reality and the cosmic illusion is what he is discussing. Okay. So, the Mayavada philosophy, the Buddhistic philosophy, the Jain philosophy, and even the Krishnamurti and also Sadhguru, they all say that the reality is in the Brahman consciousness. And the world is, no, Sadhguru does not say that. He says that the world is real. But Jiddu Krishnamurti says that, like the others, that there is no reality in the physical world. The only reality is up there. There are so many different gradations. Shankara says there's half reality and all these things. So Srivendra is discussing that we must not make absolutely trenchant and absolute opposites of the Brahman and the divine in the physical world. We should not say that spirit and matter are opposites, never possible to combine. He says that is not the reality. So we can't apply a mental logic to that which is beyond mental logic. That's basically what he's saying. Here also he's applying that. Okay. So the reasoning, the mental reasoning, which says that the absolute cannot have dynamics. What does dynamic mean? Action, energy, movement. So because they are saying it is immutable. Huh? So that's it. It's true that you can have the experience of the immutable, but that doesn't mean that that's the ultimate experience. Okay, that's what Sridhar is pointing out. Keep this in mind. In other words, just like the tree and the seed, we can't say that the seed is the reality and the tree is not a reality. We can't say that. The reality is both. One is static and the other is in movement. So you have to change your way of thinking and you have to admit that both are real in different ways. One is permanently real and the other is transitionally real. All the forms in the physical world are real in time and space. This you have to keep in mind. This is Sridhar's philosophy. The others are experiencing the Brahman consciousness and saying that the physical world is permanently unreal. That Swayambhava does not agree. It is not permanently unreal. It is real in time and space. You can also say that it is unreal. In time and space, it is half real. Sometimes it is real, sometimes it is not real. Okay, so I read each sentence, keep this in mind. So, and we'll see what he's saying. Similarly, exactly what he said earlier also, if you remember, he says that the form and the formless are the same essentially, but they are gradations of one another. They are not opposites, they are complementary aspects. Okay, that's what he's saying. Knowledge and ignorance are complementary aspects. Light and darkness are composite. What is it? Complementary aspects. Then the form and the formless are complementary aspects. Everything is complementary. There are different ways of looking at things. And again, we gave that example very clearly of take ourselves. Okay? When my soul is just, my body is born, the soul enters into it. The body goes on growing, but the soul is, at least the self, okay, is permanent. So it takes different forms. The tree is taking different forms, but the seed is producing all these things. The reality of the tree is in the seed. So this is what Swayambhava is saying. Don't make absolute transcendent opposites. They are not. They are the same thing in gradations. So now, similarly, the reasoning which cancels the dynamics of the absolute. What does it mean? The absolute is immutable. There is no dynamic action. There is no movement. We cancel the movement. That's reasoning. That reasoning is false. That's what Swayambhava is saying. That reasoning is not adequate. That reasoning is not acceptable, which cancels the dynamics of the absolute. The divine is at the highest level. Certainly, it is immutable. But immutability does not mean that there is no power. Power can be in movement, but it can also be held back. And when it is immutable, it is held back. It is not that it is absent. To think that something is immutable without power is wrong reasoning. There is immutability with power held back. Okay, and we give two examples of that. When you are running a 100-meter race, when the official says on your marks, then you go down onto your track and put your hands on the track and get ready. You are not moving at all. But does it mean to say that you are incapable of movement? Certainly not. As soon as the pistol goes, you rush into tremendous movement and you try to finish that race in no time at all. If you have watched a 100-meter run, you will see with what tremendous energy the running is made. Okay, so it is energy ready to pounce and go into action, but that is the immutability of the absolute. That's what Swayambhava is saying. The other example is also the horse racing, because before the horse racing, all the horses are ready, but they are not in movement. There's temporary immutability, but as soon as the barriers are lifted up, this horses start running with full speed. So that's exactly what like that. There is immutability.
An idea just came to my mind.
Yeah, tell me.
You know, when you run a relay race and you have 4 people in the relay, number 1 starts.
Okay.
Number 2 is ready, full
Yes.
of power and strength. It is only when he gets the baton that he starts off. And then
That's
again,
right.
number 3 is immobile, ready to start.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly. You are telling what I'm saying 4 times. The relay is 4 times what we are doing. That's absolutely correct. Okay. So this is what Swayambhava is saying. So don't think that the absolute is powerless. It is power held back. Right? Now, the imposition of the stigma of unreal reality on the pragmatic truth of things, because it is pragmatic, is difficult to accept. So they're saying, by the way, he's not rejecting, huh? Note that it is difficult to accept. There is a truth to it, a semi-truth. What is the pragmatic? The practical. The practical truth of things is in the physical world. Because it is practical,
Rangadha, I have not been able to listen to you.
it does not mean to say that it is and Navaharika Satya, the practical truth. Okay, that is Shankara's philosophy. Even is fully in agreement with that. Okay, not fully because he goes beyond Shankara also. So, he is difficult to accept, he says, because it's not the full truth. But the pragmatic truth is, after all, not something quite other, quite separate and unconnected with spiritual truth. It's a result of the energy or emotion of the dynamic activity of the spirit. There is, if you understand that at different times and different states, it can go into motion and it need not go. That's exactly what he's saying. A distinction must, no doubt, be made between the two. Yes, you have to make a distinction, but not an opposition. That's what he's saying. But the idea of an entire opposition can rest only on the postulate. Postulate, the hypothesis, the theorem. Okay? The theory with which you start postulate that a silent and quiescent status is the eternal true and whole being. Okay? That we can't accept. He's saying, but the idea of an entire opposition, okay, can rest only on the postulate, the theory that the silent and quiescent eternal and go up there. But that's what we're saying is difficult to accept. But in that case, we must conclude that there is nothing dynamic in the absolute, and all dynamism is a contradiction of the supreme nature of the divine and eternal. Because if you see from one point of view, the spirit and matter are absolutely opposites. Okay, I think I am going away from the phone. That's why I'm looking at my computer. That's why you could not hear me. Okay, so this is what Sridhar is saying. Don't think of them as opposites, but think of them as complementary aspects. Why should you think that the divine is only capable of one thing? He can be capable of so many things. Okay? This is a normal idea of man that God is omnipotent or omniscient. And you can't fix him into that. That many philosophies say that. Now we have seen that. Manichaeism, Christianity also, and even the Islamic religion, there is Jahannu and Jannat. Okay, there is heaven and there is hell. Hell has not been created by the divine. Advaita philosophy does not agree. Okay, so that's what Sri Aurobindo is an Advaitin. He is a Vedantic, so he doesn't agree. But you have to make a distinction. They are not opposites, but there are distinctions. Just like the rainbow colors, they are not absolutely different colors. They run into each other. So they are all, this is exactly the situation. Spirit is coming down and manifesting itself in matter, and there's an interpolation, there's an intermixture of all these. At any one level, all the others are there, but in lesser degree. Okay. In the spirit, matter also is there as a potentiality. In matter, at the lowest level, spirit is potentially there. This is what we have to understand. Okay? Now I read the next one. But if a temporal or cosmic reality of any kind exists, there must be a power, an inherent dynamic force of the absolute which brought it into being. So if we admit, like we are admitting, that there is a temporal reality, then we have to admit also that there is a dynamic force in the absolute which manifests itself. So in other words, that dynamic force in the absolute is static. It starts moving into movement. Like Ramakrishna says also, the same truth can be said in so many different ways. Ramakrishna used to say, when the sea is static and there's no waves, then it's a spirit, it is God. And when the sea starts moving and making waves, it becomes the physical world. And in both cases, it's a sea. One is the sea in motion, and one is the sea in static condition. So, they're saying the same thing. But if a temporal or cosmic reality of any kind exists, if it is true that the physical world has some sort of reality, there must be a power, an inherent dynamic force of the absolute which brought it into being. Because we have started with the Advaita philosophy. So it is the Advaita, Brahman, which is creating the world. It has the power to create the world. And there is no reason to suppose that the power of the absolute can do nothing but create illusions. Why should we think like that? Because we have experience, but that experience is not final. That's what he's saying. On the contrary, my computer has become static. Yeah, now it's moving. So on the contrary, where's it gone? Yeah. On the contrary, the power that creates must be the force of an omnipotent and omniscient consciousness. That's obvious, because if power is not there, and if power you grant, it has to be omnipotent and omniscient. The creations of the absolutely real should be real and not illusions. And since it is a one existence, there must be self-creations. The one existence is the absolute, the Brahman. Okay? And you can call it Brahman, but you can also call it Satchidananda. Okay? One existence, there must be self-creations. It is creating out of its own substance forms of a manifestation of the eternal, not forms of nothing erected out of the original void, whether a void being or a void consciousness by Maya. It's very similar to a mother giving birth to a child.
Rangada, again, you are not clear.
The child okay, when I'm moving away from the phone, maybe you can't hear. Okay. Now you can hear?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Yes,
Okay, you
please.
can hear.
Yes, please.
Okay, no. She
Yes,
was saying she
Rangada,
can't hear.
in between, like some net problem maybe. In between, sometimes your voice drops. Otherwise,
No,
it is
no,
clear.
not
In
net
between,
problem. My
then
face.
maybe whatever. In between, sometimes, for a short while it drops. That's all.
Then I know
Otherwise,
what to do. I'm the phone very near my face.
Even though there is some net problem, is there?
Then what? Okay, no, there's no net problem. Okay, now let us go to the next para. This para is very clear, no? Immutability does not mean permanent immutability. That's what Swami is saying. It means it has a choice. It can remain static and it can start moving. And that is very easy to understand because we also can sit in our easy chair and not move, but we have the choice to move. Even we human beings have the choice to become active. Okay? So that's exactly the thing. So let's read the next one. At the basis of the refusal. So who will read? Archana Di has not read a long time. If she
yes,
has the
I'm
text,
trying to read. If there is any network problem, tell me, because I'm not reading because of the net, Rangada. You told me it drops. Anyway, I'm trying.
yeah.
At the basis of the refusal to recognize the universe as real is the concept or experience of the reality as immutable, featureless, non-active, and realized through a consciousness that has itself fallen into a status of silence and is immobile. The universe is a result of dynamism and movement. It is force of being. It is the force It is force of being throwing itself out in action, energy at work, whether that energy be conceptive or mechanical or a spiritual, mental, vital, or material dynamis. It can thus be regarded as a contradiction or a derogation from self, of the static and immobile eternal reality, therefore unreal. But as a concept, this position of the thought has no inevitability. There is no reason why we should not conceive of the reality as at once static and dynamic. It is perfectly rational to suppose that the eternal status of being of the reality contains in it an eternal force of being, and this dynamis must necessarily carry in itself a power of action and movement, a kinesis. Both status of being and movement of being can be real. There is no reason either why they should not be simultaneous. On the contrary, simultaneity is demanded. For all energy, all kinetic action has to support itself on status or by status if it is to be effective or creative. Otherwise, there will be no solidity of anything created, only a constant world without any formation. Status of being, form of being are necessary to kinesis of being. Even if energy be the primal reality, as it seems to be in the material world, still it has to create status of itself, lasting forms, duration of beings, in order to have a support for its action. The status may be temporary. It may be only a balance or equilibrium of substance created and maintained by a constant kinesis. But while it endures, it is real, and after it ceases, we still regard it as something that was real. The principle of a supporting status for action is a permanent principle, and its action is constant in time eternity. When we discover the stable reality underlying all this movement of energy and this creation of forms, we do indeed perceive that the status of created forms is only temporary. There is a stability of repetition of the kinesis in a same persistent action and figure of movement, which maintains substance of being in stable form of itself. But this stability is created, and the one permanent and self existent status is that of the eternal being, whose energy erected the forms. But we need not therefore conclude that the temporary forms are unreal, for the energy of the being is real, and the forms made by it are forms of the being. In any case, the status of the being and the eternal dynamism of the being are both real, and they are simultaneous. The status admits of action of dynamism, and the action does not abrogate the status. We must therefore conclude that eternal status and eternal dynamism are both true of the reality, which itself surpasses both status and dynamism. The immobile and the mobile Brahman are both the same reality.
Yeah. Now, he has told us that they are not opposites, but now he's going one step more. Okay. He's saying something very interesting, and that we'll have a look at what he's saying. He is saying basically in this paragraph that not only are they completely harmonious with each other, they are not opposites. They are they support each other. Now he is saying that they are simultaneous. The status and the movement are simultaneous, like in a clock, for instance. Okay, in the clock, there is a static condition and a movement. Static condition and a movement. Static condition and a movement. This is very interesting what he's saying. He's saying both exist together all the time. Okay, this idea is repeated in so many different ways. We'll discuss all the different ways, then we'll understand. They are not absolutely opposites. Okay, in the clock, there is a static condition, and after 1 second, the second hand moves and goes again, moving and again becomes static for some time. So every second, there is a static condition and a movement, a static condition and a movement. But now Srinivas is saying that if there is a difference, if there is a time lag between the static condition and dynamic condition, then you will see that that is happening. You will see, okay? It's very interesting when you are sometimes viewing the TV or something, you will see that there is a certain jerky movement, okay? The jerky movement, you will see image and suddenly you will see it is shifting, it's jerky. But this jerkiness can disappear if the time lag between the two becomes less and less and less and less. Okay. In other words, you will see that there is a continuous movement. You will not see the the static condition at all. Like a digital watch. In a digital watch, the hand is moving continuously. But does that mean that there is no static condition? There is a static condition, and that is simultaneously it is happening. So I can explain in this way that suppose there is a time lag in clock, the mechanical clock, it stands and after 1 second the hand moves. Huh? But if you reduce that time, invent a clock where the hand will move every half a second, then the movement will be less jerky. Now reduce that half a second to quarter second, 1/1,000,000th of a second, and 100 millionth of a second. Now the movement is continuous. You will not see the static condition. That is what Srimad is saying. And this is the truth of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Okay? Brahma is constantly creating, but constantly, instantaneously, not after a lag of time. Okay? There is no time lag. Immediately, Shiva is destroying. Okay? But because it is instantaneous, it is Vishnu who is giving you the impression that there is a continuous movement without static condition. But they are both together all the time. That's what he's saying. And now if you come to spiritual experience, you can see that part of your mind, your upper part, your self and your mind, mental Purusha, can be absolutely static. And yet at the same time, you will be active in the physical world. Your body, mind, life is active. Both are possible together, which is the true spiritual experience. Okay. This is saying, right? I hope it is clear. Huh? Yeah. So, but you have to read the text. We'll read the text and see what he's saying. Okay. We have to read from at the basis of the refusal. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, at this basis of the refusal to recognize the universe as real is the concept or experience. Because in spiritual experience, you do see. And at one level, you will have an experience. At another level, you will have another experience. So concept or experience of the reality as immutable, featureless, non-active, and realized through a consciousness that has itself fallen into a status of silence and is immobile. This is the reality. You do experience you have an experience where there is no movement at all. But you conclude that this is the final experience. That is, there is another experience where both are possible. Okay. The universe is a result of dynamics in movement. It is force of being throwing itself out in action, energy at work, whether that energy be conceptive or mechanical or spiritual, mental, vital, or material dynamics. So this is very interesting. When your mind is conceiving things, there is movement in the mind. Okay. And mental substance is in movement. Okay. Create waves. Your mind is creating mental waves. We discussed this many times. Remember that there is a material substance, there is a vital substance which is subtler, there is also a mental substance. And as you keep going higher and higher, there is substance, there is a material, but that material becomes more and more subtle, more and more subtle. So at different levels, the dynamic, the power can take material energy, vital energy. When you're having a desire, it is vital energy. When you're having a thought, it is mental energy. When you have a spiritual consciousness and spirit is acting in the world, okay, he is helping Russia, he is helping Ireland, he is making changes in Turkey. He is doing all this with his spiritual energy, but it is energy. So That's what they're saying. It can be so many different types of energies. Conceptive or mechanical or a spiritual, mental. Material dynamic. Real, it is acceptable. You go to the Brahman consciousness, your physical world does not seem to be real, and your consciousness in which you are there is static, and that is the reality acceptable. It depends at which level you are. Okay, so of the static and immobile eternal reality, therefore unreal. So all these experiences, depending at which level of consciousness you are, all are acceptable at that reality. But if you want the real truth, you have to combine all the 7 planes of consciousness and arrive at the reality of all of them together. That is why Sri Lanka goes on insisting on the integral philosophy and the integral yoga. You must experience all the different aspects of the divine. Okay, that's what he's saying. It can thus be considered a contradiction. He's saying, okay, that you can think of it. It's not invalid. That's why he says it's difficult to accept. He's not rejecting. He's saying each one has got its own truth. So, and this, it can be a contradiction or it can be a derivation from itself, a derogation. A derogation means a fall, a negative development, okay, a lessening, a diminution if you want. Okay. I've highlighted derogation. Derogation means a partial taking away the effectiveness of a law, a partial repeal or abolition of a law. That's the meaning of the word derogation. Partly is acceptable, partly it is not. Conditional of the static and immobile eternal reality. Therefore, unreal. So, this is basically what he's saying in the, but they are both together, always together. But you can see, think of this in other ways. You can say Purusha and Prakriti are always together. You can say in the finite, there is the infinite, and in the infinite, there is the finite. They are always together in different quantities or different qualities, as you want to put it. We go back to that famous Blake, na? Okay. Remember? To see a world in a grain of sand, okay? And heaven in a wide, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. They are not opposites, but they are always involved in each other. Purusha and Prakriti are always together, but in different proportions. That's what saying is. It is perfectly rational to suppose that the eternal status of being of the reality contains in it an eternal force of condition is not incapable of movement. It is capable of movement, but by choice, it is remaining static. And this dynamism must necessarily carry in itself a power of action and movement, a kinesis. Status of being and movement of being only real. There is no reason either why they should not be simultaneous. Now, this is the new idea that is putting in. They are always together and always are present together. There is no reason why they should not be simultaneous. On the contrary, simultaneity is this is what is the spiritual. You can say that there is a continuity, but you can also say that there is a there is a simultaneity. They both are involved in each other. No? We go back to the idea of the cinema. No? In the cinema, when you're watching, you feel that there is continuous movement. We are watching the person who is speaking and the person who is acting or running. You feel that it is absolutely like the physical world. There's a continuity of action. Actually, the cinema, each second of action is broken down into 24 frames. And 24 frames means static. Each frame is static. But when you run them together, it feels that it is a continuous movement. So movement and status are always the image of the cinema is one, and the image of the clock is another. Okay, where you can explain this. Okay, so what he's saying. There is no reason either why they should not be simultaneous. On the contrary, simultaneity is demanded for all energy, all kinetic action has to support itself on status or by status if it is to be effective or creative. How can the river exist without the shear? How can the river come into existence if the snow is not there static on the mountain? How can the river come from the dam if the static condition of the water behind the dam is not there? There has to be status and there has to be the static condition is always supporting the movement. That's what he's saying. So you come back to the spirit and matter. Spirit is a reality, and it is spirit that is matter. Okay? That's what he's saying. There is no reason either why they should not be simultaneous. On the contrary, simultaneity is demanded for all energy, all kinetic action has to support itself on status or by status. Okay. Now that's interesting. Status or by status. If it is to be effective or creative. Otherwise, there will be no solidity of anything created. Form of being are necessary to kinesis of being. Form of being, okay, are necessary to kinesis of being. Even if energy be the primal reality, as it seems to be in the physical world, then it has to create status of itself, lasting forms, in order to have a support for its action. In other words, even a stone which seems to be absolutely static is really, it is changing because the action of the wind, the temperature, all this is making it change. It is change and there is static condition in the world. The principle of a support status or action is a permanent principle and its action is constant in time eternity. Note, in time eternity, it is constant, but in timeless eternity, it is static. When we discover the stable reality underlying all this movement of energy and its creation of forms, we do indeed see that the status of created forms is only temporary. It's in time and space. There is a stability of repetition of the kinesis in a same persistent action and figure of movement which maintains substance of being in stable form of itself. But this stability is created, and one permanent and self-existent status is that of eternal being whose energy erected the forms. But we need not therefore conclude that the temporary forms are unreal. Reality can be in and it can be outside. That's basically what we're saying. Our idea is that timeless is real and the time is not fully correct. That's but we need not therefore conclude that the temporary forms are unreal. Okay. Temporal unreality, we are thinking that it is unreal, but no, they can be real in time as well as outside time. But the energy of the being is real and forms made by it are forms of the being. In any case, the status of the being and the eternal dynamics of the being are both real. Movement is real and static condition also is real. And they are simultaneous. Very clearly he is saying that they always are involved with each other. The status admits of action of dynamics and the action does not abrogate the status. We must therefore conclude that eternal status and eternal dynamics are both true of this reality which itself surpasses both status and dynamics. So the static condition is the Brahman, the dynamic condition is the physical world, but where do you see their total harmony at the third level. Okay, that's what he's saying. Both are real. The reality which surpasses them, that's the supermind. Okay, both status dynamic, immobile and the mobile are both the same reality. When you go to the third level, the problem is solved, and you know that it is. There is an absolute actually capable of movement. That's what it is. 8:33. So we have got 2 minutes. We stop here today. Okay. Now I have held the phone very near my mouth, and I don't think there is any problem in hearing. Nah? Can you
Yes.
confirm that?
Yes.
Yeah, we could hear you distinctly.
Yeah, because I was making the mistake of keeping the phone on the table and moving my face away. But now I okay. We stop here today.
Yes, please. Merci beaucoup.
Make
Best of luck. Au revoir, Tilo.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Au revoir. Have a nice day.